So this is a rarefied, incredible group of people. The list is something that Apolitical worked together on with the World Economic Forum, and it really recognizes excellence in the field. So you're hearing from people who are on the frontiers. Just briefly, a little bit of context on why I'm moderating this conversation and my interests. Apolitical, which I run, is a social learning platform for government, helping governments develop skills for the 21st century. We're used by more than 160,000 public servants in 170 different countries, and we're particularly interested in skills around agility. And one program that might be relevant to many of you that we're working on will be a world-first program designed for public servants in a digital-first, data-first world, which will hopefully culminate in a master's degree from the London School of Economics. And agility will be core to the challenges we cover in that. So, to kick us off, and in the course of answering the first question, our panelists will also give a bit of context on their work. I'm going to lead with a question around transformation, which is used to cover all manner of innovations, big and small, and means many things to many different people. So I'm going to ask each of our panelists to say what transformation means to them in the context of their incredible work. And Rachel Chikwambda, I'll start with you.
Thank you very much. And to start off and to reflect what transformation means in my line of work, I will lean on the work that we did for my home province, Gauteng's digital transformation, where the key drivers, Gauteng, for context, is South Africa's largest economy, the 8th largest on the African continent. And in that context, we were trying to create efficient service delivery on the part of government, but as well trying to ensure that we create new economic opportunities while we were trying to do that. Necessarily, that meant that we needed to look at the concept of governance in a completely different way, looking at trying to get everyone in different departments and different hierarchies to push in the one and pull in one direction with respect to very specific targets of service delivery on digital platforms to address issues of discontent in populations that are excluded, but as well to address issues of job creation and issues of operational efficiency in service delivery. That brought together issues of data at the heart of decision making. And then having data is owned at different levels. How could we as a province then try to bring all this together, creating new platforms of data ownership, data governance, interoperability of data, looking at data that is not necessarily owned by everyone, by anyone, but by everyone, but keeping its integrity together. How then do we then get collaboration across all departments to try and make this vision happen, to transform the manner in which we deliver services? So it is about collaboration, while then we think about changing fundamentally how government works across different hierarchies, but also across different silos. In doing that dynamically is informed by data that we see, but also generating value in creating new businesses and new entrants by pulling together data and information that helps us to govern, but creates new opportunity. So that, to us, was transformative and continues to be transformative, from improving service delivery, but as well to creating new opportunity and extending inclusivity, because we think about data and data-informed businesses in townships, in rural areas, in places where this was never a concept. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And that echoes something we hear on Apolitical all the time. Making data work is one of the most transformative innovations, one of the hardest, but has so many benefits across so many policy areas. So from one giant on the African continent to another, Ekeledo, can you speak about what transformation means in your work?
Yeah. Now, transformation in our work, to put it in a plain way, is a different way of doing things, right? I run an organization called AfriLabs. It's a network organization of innovation and technology hubs across Africa. And these centers that are members of AfriLabs work to support tech innovators and entrepreneurs across 52 African countries, build successful businesses, and create innovative solutions across various sectors. Now, transformation to us is basically leveraging on digital technologies, new ways of working, leveraging on data, open data, and new ways of thinking as well. Because when you talk about innovation, it's really not only about the technology in itself, but also the mindset. And I'm sure we'll speak about that later today on the panel, speaking about the Agile mindset. Now, for us, it really crossed across society, right? The transformation of society. So when you look at societies, you're looking at the private sector. What are the new ways of running an organization, for example? How are organizations going digital? How is, just to put in a very practical way, how does HR operate? How do you integrate, leverage on the data you have of your customers into the business? When you talk about government, for example, transformation is how do you provide more public goods and services to your citizens, right? How do you leverage on e-government technologies? How do you leverage on open data in order to better support the citizens and to better achieve your mission? How do you also integrate new ways of policy making? That's very important for us. When we talk about transformation at AfriLabs, we're having conversations about how to ensure that regulations don't take 5 to 10 years to review and to set up new laws and policies, but how can we do it in a quick, agile way? So these are all examples of transformation, and it cuts across sectors. When we talk about agriculture, right now we're talking about the shortages of wheat, for example, because of the war going on. How do we transform the agricultural sector in that area, for example, to increase production, for example? How do we ensure food security? When we talk about financial services, that's another conversation. The transformation of the fintech industry across the world. We're talking about in Africa, in Europe, a provision of digital finance to people who ordinarily wouldn't have. We're talking about the unbanked as well. Complete industries have been revolutionized. So that's what transformation is for us, right? We can talk about the healthcare sector and education and all of that. So that's what transformation is to us.
So
it's an exciting word for us.
A small vision.
In this one, yes.
So in the spirit of agility, I'm going to pause this question and just put a rapid fire question to all our panelists, picking up, Anna, on your points around mindsets. So for each of you, what, in a word or a couple of words, is the skill set or mindset that is most important to unlocking agility and transformation in government? Back to you.
Can do a mindset that says it's possible, and an open mindset to look at possibilities even when we're not yet convinced things could go in a certain direction. So open, possible mindset.
Can do and openness. Thank you, Anna.
A flexible, collaborative, and iterative mindset.
Open, flexible, collaborative, iterative. Daniela.
Entrepreneurial, basically, not being afraid of trying and failing.
Very much echoing what Rachel said. And Mukarram.
I think they've about said it all. It's collaborative learning. It's learning from the private sector, from each other, from other departments, from other nations. So looking around, learning, adopting, and being agile.
I think learning adds an important coda to openness and innovation. Thank you for that. So I'm going to go back to the question about the meaning of transformation, and Daniela, hand over to you.
So the meaning of transformation is digital transformation in my world. To give a little of context of who I am and what I do, right now I'm a CEO and founder of the largest or the most ahead scale-up in AI in the world. We have presence, we're headquartered in the US, in Seattle, but I'm double national, so I'm Portuguese originally, from Portugal, and American. And so my world has been divided between the US and Europe and Japan, but mostly US and Europe, where we have most of our R&D in Portugal, building a company that is providing data for human-computer interaction applications. We started, so everything from conversational AI, natural language processing, computer vision. So we provide data for the big builders of AI in the world. Lately, especially with COVID hitting the world, what happened what happened everywhere is that economies, and some of them more than others, realized that they were vulnerable to certain things that they couldn't control, like pandemics. And actually, if they were prepared with AI, and before AI, digital transformation, which is a buzzword in all governments, and it's been in the agendas of the last decade, but really had to be pushed after the pandemic. The reality is we would not have seen, especially in the US, and especially in the US, so many small and medium businesses die because consumers could not reach there anymore. I mean, and even worse at the government level, people in Europe have queues of months to actually be able to talk with social security services to supply them with paychecks or aid and so on. So what everybody realizes is that without the digital transformation being in motion, and since then Europe started the Agenda for 2030 Compass where digital transformation and AI and cyber is there. The US created the AI strategy, the NAIR, the strategy for AI for the country, where I'm part of the group of 12. I'm the only entrepreneur there as well. But to push precisely, it's a work of 1.5 years to start introducing in the bills of the United States, the Constitution, a lot more awareness, education, and readiness for pandemics. So this is the work we've been doing, and I guess that's what made me in that list. I've been advising the EU, advising a lot of presidents, and of course, continue to serve the world in the private sector to push AI. We have launched the marketplace of data, which exactly accelerates the adoption of AI in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniela. So we've heard data in the introductions from each of our panelists so far. Mukarram, I hope you're going to mention it too.
A little bit. Okay, so I'll just set the context a little bit. Doing business is hard. Starting a business, setting it up, operating it, making it grow, this is hard. And this is hard for the small ones, the micro ones, the women entrepreneur who have other responsibilities, and young startups, boys coming out of colleges and universities. And it's not the government's business to make it harder, but the government does. In Pakistan, we have a federal system where there is a federal government, and then we have provincial governments, and then we have municipal authorities. And there are overlaps. So the same things are being checked and inspected, and licenses and registrations are being issued at multiple levels. And it's not allowing the potential of the small businesses, the micro businesses, the entrepreneurs, the startups to flower, to flourish, to get where it needs to get. So my job is to make it less difficult for businesses. I work with my team, and we work with over 70 departments in Pakistan. Over the last year, we have changed more than 100 regulations. Last count was 115. And Technology is one part of it, but a lot of the processes which are there are because of the law or the regulation. And unless until the law or the regulation is not changed, the technology would have to work in accordance with the law. So we have to work with that. And when we try to work with that, how we do it is we go to the private sector. We go to the Surgical Association or Cutlery Association or Plastic Recycling Association or some other sector of the economy, and we ask them what are the pain points that you have in dealing with the government. And they come up with a list of issues, and we then look at the regulations which support those processes, and we look at how we can change them. Then comes the harder part, when we go to the government organization and we say, here's a proposal, this is how you do it currently, but I think, or we think, that you should not be doing it. It is too costly, too cumbersome, it takes too much paperwork, it is much of a hardship. And then they have their own point of view that we have to do it because health or safety, security, environmental reasons. So they come up with their own justification of why they do it that way. And then a path has to be found. So what we've developed is a model of 5 wheels, and I will be talking more about it later on. But that 5 wheels model transforms the organization from being regulation-centric to business-centric. So for me, the transformation is the organization should look at regulation from a business point of view, that this is how the business is currently handling it, which is too difficult. How can we do something in which our regulatory objectives are met without imposing too high a burden in terms of cost, in terms of time, in terms of resources on the businesses. So for me, the transformation is going from regulation-centric to people-centric.
Thank you so much. And I so applaud your work. We started Apolitical in part to support innovators like Mukarram working on the inside, which is the hardest battle to fight, as you say. So another rapid fire question. I'm going to start from this side of the panel again and work this way. On a scale of 1 to 5, how agile do you think your government is?
We've come to 3.
Come to 3. And how long ago were you at 1?
4 years ago.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, 4 years ago, we were at the ease of doing business index. We were at 147. In the past 3 years, we've jumped 39 positions and moved to 108.
Wow. Daniela, and maybe you can answer on behalf of the US and Portugal.
I would say a 4 in the US. I mean, it was astonishing, the capacity of response financially to a lot of the businesses that US did. That is astonishing. I would say probably a 3 in Portugal. It was very tough to even get their heads around what was going on. Looking at a situation as a pandemic, of course.
And if we take the US at 4, what would it take for you to say the US is now at 5?
A much better communication with citizens. Of course, compared to Europe, the US doesn't have the same dependency, or the citizens don't have the same dependency that the EU citizens have on governments. It's the way it is set up, but it is still a very slow process for citizens to interact with government functions.
Anna, Nigeria. How would you rate Nigeria?
Okay. I would say a 3, right? And we saw progress over the last couple of years. I would say COVID-19 definitely brought on the need to be more agile and be transformative. I mean, governments all over the world had to just act quick, embrace technology and new ways of working. But being that I also operate across the continent, I would also answer that it ranges across the African continent between 2, with some environments that are quite difficult, to about 3.5, to governments that embrace more e-government tools and platforms.
So I won't ask you to call out the laggards on the continent, but who are the
wouldn't.
leaders?
I wouldn't.
Can you give us a couple of the leaders?
Yes, I'll take a country like Rwanda, for example, is doing quite well, right? Over the past 3 years, they've put digital transformation at the forefront of their agenda. So that would be a good example of a country that is moving quite fast. And they're very strong on international cooperation, multilateral cooperation, and cross-border cooperation as well. So this is basically a trend I envision seeing over the next 5 to 10 years, especially with the enactment of the African Continental Free Trade Area. That makes the African continent the largest single market on the continent. As we push towards implementation and looking at things such as digital trade, implementation of cross-border policies and the likes, I expect to see a whole lot more agile governments in Africa.
Fingers crossed, thank you. And what you say about COVID echoes what we've seen. We polled our global membership a few months into the pandemic and asked them their greatest concerns. And the number one concern, unsurprisingly, was supporting vulnerable people. But the number two concern was preserving the positive innovations in government that have arisen from COVID. So I think it's being embraced, those shifts are being embraced in governments everywhere. South Africa, on a scale of 1 to 5.
I would say it's a 3, and I would explain these 3. There's sectors in which there are 5. Like banking services, institutions, taxation, things like that, where they're really, really very good. Then there are sectors where they are like a 2, I think, in terms of inclusivity, healthcare, and service delivery at the municipal level, which is really quite appalling. So it's a country of these dichotomies from my perspective. They're very excellent and things that need to change. But I think the saving grace is COVID has accelerated the manner in which we use data, the manner in which we get insight, and the manner in which we quickly pivot to make decisions. So that bodes well for moving from 3, removing the 2s to 3s, and everyone to a 5.
Fantastic, thank you. So we have about 10 minutes left in the session, and I want to leave at least 5 minutes for questions for our fabulous panelists. So I'm going to ask the panelists to answer these next questions as rapidly as possible, as agilely as possible. And Rachel, starting with you and picking up on your point about inclusivity, what do organizations like yours, like CSIR, play in ensuring governance brings about more, not less, inclusivity?
We demystify technologies, and then we provide approaches of the how to govern when you're dealing with emerging technologies. And we provide those experimental lab sandboxes, working with government to help them to design legislation that is appropriate.
Fantastic, thank you. Demystification, experimental sandboxes, which was, I think, started in the UK and has now spread around the world, a fantastic approach to innovation. Anna, you already spoke about the huge potential of the African continent as the largest market, if it collaborates. What are some of the major challenges one needs to overcome to enable Africa to work across borders and perhaps set an example for cross-border collaboration everywhere?
Well, I'll say 2 things mainly. One is ensuring that all the governments, and I know this is quite hard, but you mentioned, your question is on challenge, really understand the potential, the huge $1 trillion potential of ensuring that the African Continental Free Trade Area works. Because at the moment, there are still concerns about competitiveness, there's a protection of markets and things like that, but it's important to bring the government and the private sector, the citizens, and all stakeholders in the room to really understand the potential. Then 2 is, again, taking a collaborative approach. One of the things we do at AfriLabs, for example, when we're pushing for policies, enabling policy, and in our policy advocacy work, is ensuring that every voice is in the room, right? And this is basically taking an inclusive co-creation approach, right? I'm sure Rachel can tell you about that, even talking about regulatory sandboxes and the like. So these are some of the key areas when you talk about agile regulation, for example, and policy making and all of that. Just to add again, one of the issues, or well, some of the issues of the African Continental Free Trade Area implementation isn't just about the tariffs, right? Everyone is focused on, low tariffs, ease of movement and all that. But then there are other issues, like when we talk about non-tariff barriers, for example, when we talk about the lack of harmonization of policy. So if you're a fintech, for example, set up in Senegal and you want to set up in Egypt, it's difficult because you have to meet up with the regulatory environment of the central bank, right? Now we're talking about 54, 55 African central banks across the continent. Same with the healthcare sector and speaking about the ministries of health, for example. So breaking down those barriers on a continental level is quite important, both on a Pan-African scale, but also working with individual governments to ensure that their regulations are harmonized.
Daniela, you're in this unique position where you are leading a leading company in a leading space, and you are immersed in the challenges that one of the world's most significant governments is facing in embracing AI. What is the role of a startup like yours and other startups like yours in promoting and advancing agile governance?
Education, literacy, AI literacy, digital transformation literacy. What does that mean for the governments and for verticals in the industry that are basically more conservative in reacting to change? That's what it takes, and it's not an easy task, and it's been going on for a while. We need to explain more than anything that it will work. It takes investment. It's not an investment that is paid off in the first 2 or 3 years, but we got to do it.
Couldn't agree more with that. We're seeing a huge demand for literacy on AI. We were just talking about it earlier from government, and we'll be working on creating some of that. But it's worth just noting where we're starting, because across government, we still see a huge gap in basic literacy around data, even before you get to data's application and incorporation into AI. So it's a steep mountain to climb, but at least there's recognition. Mukarram, last but not least, I would love you to talk a little bit about the regulatory guillotine mechanism that you've pioneered, and also how that's evolved to respond to the wider challenge of transformation.
Yes, the government departments are working in silos, so sometimes they don't know what the other department is doing. I'll just give you a quick example, a very ridiculous situation in which all the lubricating oil which was coming into Pakistan was being tested and released after approvals by one oil regulator and one standards and quality control authority. And both of them were taking out samples, getting them tested, and releasing them. And we were approached by the businesses that this is a duplication. So we started working with them, and we found out that they both were testing it against the same standards. So it was not that they had different standards. And neither of them had a laboratory of its own. So the samples were also being sent to the same laboratory. And for each sample to be tested, it cost about $200 to the business. So if there were 4 different varieties, so 4 samples were being taken out. So we just guillotined one after discussion, because although they agreed that the duplication should not be there, but there was no consensus who should be the regulator. So the oil people said that the standards people should go out, I should regulate it, and the standards people said that the oil people should go out. So ultimately, we threw both of them out and made customs the regulator. So now the custom takes out the samples and gets them tested. So there are a lot of duplication which can be removed through guillotine. Similarly, in a number of cases, inspections are duplicated, documentation is duplicated. Through the regulatory guillotine mechanism, we look at it from a whole of government approach. And if one department is taking care of one aspect, it has to be guillotined from the other sides.
Thank you so much. I'm going to ask our panelists just to end with one word or one sentence they want to leave you with to remember.
Transformation means moving out of that comfort zone, even when you don't want to.
Out of your comfort zone.
Okay.
I would say the solutions are out there. Just look into the entrepreneurship and innovation ecosystem across various sectors. The solutions are there. The entrepreneurs, innovators, the public sector development agencies need to come together, identify the existing solutions, and then co-create and tweak them to solve the challenges of today.
100%. McKinsey calculated that if governments just did what was working elsewhere, it would save $3.5 trillion a year. Daniela.
I've been defending a United Nations for AI across governments, just because this is such a field that touches all human aspects, and it's a global thing that we can't be alone, each government doing their own thing. We need to work together more and more.
Working together. Last word.
3 words.
3 words. Last 3 words.
Listen, reflect, experiment.
Listen, reflect, experiment. Well said. Thank you so much, everyone. Please give them a round of applause.